minutes late. We just wanted to leave time for those struggling into the webinar, maybe a couple of minutes late. We know it can take a little bit of time to get onto the GoToWebinar technology. So before we go ahead and get started, I just want to go over how to use GoToWebinar. So pictured on the PowerPoint, you should see this figure on your screen. If you don't, you may have the grab tab minimized. So if you look at figure B, you can just click on the image of the arrows, and that should extend it. So in here, you should also be able to see all the attendees on the webinar. And it's really important that you're able to see the question pane. So that allows you to ask any questions to us during the webinar. And we'll have a Q&A section at the end. But if anything comes up, you can submit it through there throughout the webinar. So the topic of our webinar today is an overview of the Working Family Success Network in community colleges. I'm going to go ahead and first introduce the Achieving the Dream staff on today's webinar. My name is Elissa Sheldneck. I'm an Assistant Director of Programs. Also here with me is Julian Haynes, an Associate Director of Programs and Policy. And then we are also pleased to have Christina Testa-Buzzi, the Director of Adult Learning at Norwalk Community College, and she's going to be sharing with you Norwalk's experience with the WFSN strategy. So I'm going to go ahead and give the floor over to Julian.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elissa, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon to learn a little bit about the Working Family Success Network and Community College Initiative. We really appreciate you spending some time to hear about this very exciting work, and we certainly appreciate the effort and interest and availability of Dr. Rodriguez, the Chancellor of the LA Community College District, to work with all of you and kind of help put this on your radar to join us today and learn more about our work. So I'm just going to kind of go through the agenda for today is to go over the history of WFSN briefly, the WFSN strategy as ATD is serving as the intermediary for the expansion of this work. Just a couple data points that suggest some of the successes in the past about the implementation of the strategy and what it means for student success. Briefly discuss the expansion initiative where we are right now, as it's been nearly a year since we began this process, ATD that is, as the intermediary organization. I will then hand it off to Christina to talk a little bit about Norwalk. I will have Q&A. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So if we just look at kind of the brief history of WFSN, it was an initiative that was pioneered by the Annie E. Casey Foundation through its Center for Working Families Investments, and was developed to help low-income families reach financial stability and move up the economic ladder. WFSN offers an innovative framework for how families can increase their earnings and income, reduce their financial transaction costs, and build wealth for themselves and their communities. The WFSN model was first launched in neighborhood-based hubs or centers, and brings together or bundles, you'll learn more about bundling a little bit later, bundle services in education and employment advancement, income and work supports, and financial and asset building in order to help families build self-sufficiency and stabilize their finances. Today, there's growing evidence. Let's see here. Today, there's growing evidence and support that the WFSN model applies to the work of community colleges as well, where many students from economically disadvantaged families go to get the skills and education they need to build better lives. I do want to note that the work of the WFSN initiative that ATD has inherited has been developed by a design team of thought leaders in workforce development, higher education policy, and the community college sector itself. The design team that worked side by side with Achieving the Dream is comprised of the Aspen Institute Economic Opportunities Program, MDC, Center on Law and Social Policy, and Brendan Roberts and Associates Consulting, and other leaders in this space. And these partners will continue to play a vital role in this work moving forward. So that's just a bit of brief history about WFSN and how it kind of evolved from the Center for Working Families model promoted by the Annie Casey Foundation. But I also just want to mention briefly that included in this, as the work transitions to being in community colleges, MDC in North Carolina worked with a network of 15 or so community colleges to implement this strategy in community colleges to promote student success. Additionally, there's a larger network of organizations, including LISC and United Way, who have their own kind of versions of their own take on integrated service delivery to support both clients in the community and student success. In particular, being that you're in California, I'm sure you all are aware that United Way has Spark Point centers, the majority of which are not in community colleges, actually only one at Skyline and a new one at Kenyatta Community College. In addition, LISC has financial opportunity centers, and they're working on expanding that model into community colleges as well. Most recently, I believe, at a community college in Chicago. So, achieving the dream with our many partners in this work, we are not alone in promoting this idea of integrating services or providing services in a more comprehensive way to support, in our case, students more holistically with a variety of non-academic supports and services they need to be successful in both their academic endeavors and career. So I briefly mentioned this already, but the three core pillars of WFSN comprise education and employment services, income and work supports, and financial services and asset building. A few examples for education and employment advancement that include job readiness, job training, job placement, career coaching, building soft skills, a variety of services that can kind of complement and align with the student's degree pathway to help ensure that they are able to enter the job market immediately and earn a sound, sustaining wage. A couple of examples for income and work supports includes, demystifying the financial aid process, providing public benefits access screening, attainment and recertification, learning more about tax credits, free tax assistance, perhaps earned income tax credits, child care subsidies, those things. All of the ways that a student's finances can be supplemented in ways that they may not be aware of to help them in their pathway to and through college. As many of us know, a lot of these benefits are often left on the table, mostly because of lack of good information and good support for students to access these services. The final and third pillar, the financial services and asset building pillar, comprises financial education and coaching, linked to affordable products and services to help families and students build self-sufficiency. And these are tools and products, or perhaps nuanced ways of delivering financial education or financial services to students to increase their chances of successfully matriculating to get their degree. This also includes matched savings accounts, IDAs, developing partnerships with local financial institutions to help students manage their money. So it's a combination of the education, employment advancement, income and work supports, and financial services and asset building that comprise the WFSN strategy. So with that, one thing that we have learned and that others have learned in community colleges, as well as those who are promoting this strategy in community-based organizations, is the importance of a term that is used known as bundling, or kind of the intentional, as you'll see, selection and integration of services that help a student achieve a specific goal, and sequencing and timing of the service delivery so that the student receives services in at least 2 of the 3 core service areas. So very briefly, what this means is students who receive a variety of services across the 3 pillars that I just mentioned stand a greater likelihood of successfully, making to the next semester, accumulating more credits, and getting a job. Some of the early research shows. So that a key word here in the bundling component is that it is done with intentionality. So if you know that a student receives one service on one side of campus, but historically the themes have emerged in the past that they also will need another service, and how do you intentionally put those services together and make successful referrals for that student to receive them in combination versus only receiving one of those services. So I think we can move on from bundling. We can get into more of that as this initiative moves forward. So the integration of these core service areas historically have happened in 3 different ways on your campus. So one thing that we like to stress with colleges who are interested in implementing this strategy is that we don't want you to reinvent the wheel. To the extent you already have some of these services available on your campus, it's a matter of expanding them to support more students and identifying, I guess, ways to perhaps make it the process a little bit more efficient to support student success. That said, it is not always done in the same way. Some colleges have a physical space, they have a hub on campus that they use to integrate these services. Others use specific people who are known resources on campus who, so-and-so is the person to go to if you want to learn more about accessing public benefits or learning more about child care centers or child care subsidies, and others kind of included in their overall retention and completion strategy at their campus. So it's weaved into their strategic planning process in a variety of ways where it's a strategy that everyone is aware of, and it's kind of, there are multiple activities happening simultaneously on campus to support students receiving these services. So just briefly about a physical place on campus, some colleges, they pick a site like that may be allied with student services, workforce development, perhaps a computer lab and other resources. It is seen as the home for the delivery of integrated services. One example that's included in the MDC implementation guide that we sent out prior to this webinar is at Phillips Community College. There is a WFSN computer lab located within the college's Career Pathways Center. Another example is that Central New Mexico has a prominent office suite near the college's main entrance that houses offices for the school's achievement coaches and is the home base for CNM Connect, the college's brand for its WFSNCC activities. So those are 2 good examples of what of how a physical place has been used to promote and deliver WFSNCC services. Just briefly again about using specific people known on campus as resources. This is often the case. I think if perhaps there's less of a structure around how these services are delivered, but they exist on campus no less. But it is one person on campus who knows how to access the services. They've got strong connections to community organizations that perhaps can fill any gaps in services regarding benefits access or financial coaching or what have you. And then lastly, just a little bit more on the retention and completion strategy. It aims to kind of remove the systemic barriers that students encounter. Again, to use Central New Mexico as an example, they have adopted this perspective for the long-term goal of serving all students across 5 campuses. So it is really ingrained in the business of their daily business of student support. And that is one thing that we will discuss with you to a great deal, to the extent you're interested in joining this network of colleges, the importance of culture change kind of being at the center of how students are supported, and it being used to catalyze this kind of culture change and becoming increasingly student-centric in how what students need, what services students need to successfully complete beyond just academic services. As we've talked about, many of these non-academic supports and services are needed for them to be successful in their academic and beyond, careers and beyond. So just really briefly about data. Again, we're still kind of dipping into a bit of a history of the initiative. You'll see up here some of the colleges that participated as a result of an MDC's network of Center for Working Families strategy implementation. You'll see that the students, just going back to bundling briefly, percentage of students who received 2 of the 3 Center for Working Families core pillars did, they stood a greater chance of enrolling in subsequent terms. And again, a lot of this data is early because it's not been implemented and studied to a very deep degree in community colleges. But we do know anecdotally that students who receive multiple services in sequence and given it the right intensity level, will likely do better in college in return for a second term, and I would like to believe increase their chances of graduating and attaining a job. So another just quick slide here regarding the data. Students who receive bundled services versus students who did not receive bundled services. And I think this just to talk about the intentionality again is being very important. Understanding your student, the needs of your student body, understanding the individual needs of each student actually, and being able to appropriately refer and provide the correct services at the right time to ensure that they do not stop out or drop out for financial reasons. So just briefly, some of the major economic outcome examples include staying employed, earning vocational certification or associate's degree, buying a car, effects of bundled services, 3 to 4 times more likely to achieve a major economic outcome than clients with only one service, and then the effects of intensity. So this is where kind of aligning the right service at the right time at the right intensity level. And I'll pause here really briefly. I realize I'm going through this pretty quickly, but when I say intensity, I mean an example that we use in this strategy, as you may have read in some of our materials, we distinguish between high and low touch services. High touch services would include, much more substantive one-on-one support. Let's say using financial coaching as an example, where a student would receive kind of dedicated one-on-one support from a financial coach to learn more about kind of their debt to potential income ratio, or debt or current income ratio, or managing their financial aid. Any variety of supports and services that one-on-one coaching would require. It also includes pretty intensive follow-up. We recognize that higher touch services will be, to the extent colleges have limited capacity, will be administered to a smaller percentage of students, but would like to yield greater outcomes with regard to that particular student. Lower touch services, an example might be including, if any of you all have mandatory student success courses on your campus, if you embedded a benefits access component in that student success course to a broad population of students, that'd be considered a lower touch service. But there are connections that need to be made between both. So being able to successfully identify, engage, and refer students who are receiving lower touch services that may need higher touch services is critical in understanding the intensity levels and what students need and when. So I've run through kind of the brief history of WFSN, and I guess we'll pause for the end if there are any questions. But if you have questions about kind of the lead up to ATD's current role in the expansion of this work as the National Managing Organization and Intermediary, please jot them down. If you have questions about the strategy itself, please jot them down. We can address those at the end. And then I guess without further ado, I'll just kind of move forward onto the Working Family Success Network Community College Initiative expansion as we see it today. There are 16 colleges in 4 states working to implement a strategy to promote post-secondary completion for students. We originally started, it was a national expansion initiative that included 8 prospective expansion states. The design team that I mentioned earlier played an instrumental role in helping us identify the criteria by which we would use to identify likely colleges to receive funding to implement this strategy. Through a competitive process, we narrowed that the initial prospective 8 states down to 4 states, and 32 prospective colleges down to 16 colleges. The primary goals of the initiative include expanding the scale of the WFSN strategy in 16 to 18 influential and effective community colleges in 4 states, to strengthen the evidence base for implementing the WFSN strategy in community colleges by highlighting the ways in which it contributes to higher persistence, completion, and job attainment for low-income students, and to demonstrate that embedding the WFSN strategy in college processes and systems can be cost-effective and has the potential to catalyze institutional culture change. Excuse me. So those are the three primary goals of the initiative that we have kind of integrated into everything that we have been doing as we work with the 16 colleges identified through our competitive process. So briefly, who's involved? Again, I mentioned that we kind of, through a competitive process, we narrowed the 8 states down to 4, and we ended up landing in, as you'll see in the map, in the west, we've got Washington State, your own state, California, Arkansas, and Virginia. In each state, we worked with, and the next slide will indicate the colleges in those states that in the first round we identified to participate in the WFSN initiative, and the corresponding state partner organizations that we worked with very, very strategically to identify those colleges. And so we reached out to them to help us with our statewide selection process. A brief note about the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office. We worked with them, and we realized there was a relatively tight timeline that we were asking them to submit prospective colleges to submit a full proposal to be considered for funding for this initiative. And we fully recognize then, and we fully recognize now that we know that they reached out to the LA Community College District, but because the turnaround was so tight, we certainly understand why many of the colleges that may have been eligible in the state of California did not, in fact, submit their mini RFP at that time. But we recognize that Los Angeles is a critical area for this work in terms of driving policy statewide. A huge number of low-income students of color in the LA Community College District, and we always kind of knew that if we didn't get LA in the first round, that we would be going back to LA once again to get some colleges in the door who are interested in pursuing this work. But we've got a great network of 16 colleges across the U.S. and great state partners that are helping facilitate the development of this work. One thing I probably should have mentioned at the very beginning is that this initiative receives very generous support from the funders you'll see on the slide: Lumina Foundation, W.K. Clark Foundation, W.K. Kellogg Foundation, MetLife Foundation, NE Casey Foundation, Bank of America, Charitable Foundation, Kresge Foundation, most recently. And so I just want to talk briefly about the process to date after the colleges were selected. They were selected last May and attended an inaugural forum or kickoff event in June. It was a 2-day event, and they received just tons of information about the initiative. We had content experts from all across the country come in to discuss the nuances of implementing this strategy, and they received a lot of in-person technical assistance across the 3 core pillars as we've discussed. Another critical component of this work that has helped them advance their thinking about how this work might be implemented included the development of logic models. And we had implementation evaluation. We had an implementation evaluation team work with each consortium in each state to conduct workshops that work with the colleges on filling out their logic models. The logic models aligned directly with the key goals of the initiative. So we asked them to identify activities that they would need to successfully complete to fulfill the goals of the initiative. And again, that is providing WFSNCC services to an increasingly large number of low-income students, using data to inform how services are delivered and how the provision of these services can be aligned with student unit record data, so we can get some understanding toward the end of this initiative to what extent there's a correlation between the two, provision of those non-academic services and academic outcomes, and also using it to catalyze culture change. So they use this as a guide to say, all right, to achieve these goals, what activities do we need to put in place, and when do we need to have them in place? They used that logic model to develop their draft implementation plans that they submitted in mid-November, and through a pretty comprehensive process that included Achieving the Dream staff, our implementation evaluators, and our various WFSNCC coaches. We provided them substantive feedback on their implementation plans that really, again, it aligns directly with the goals of the initiative and aligns directly with the information included in the logic model. So we, as I mentioned, with regard to technical assistance, Achieving the Dream works with a number of coaches. Christina Testabuzzi on the call today is actually one of our coaches. And we have a diverse group of technical assistance providers, many of whom have either implemented this strategy on their campus, have deep knowledge in the 3 core pillars, perhaps financial coaching, or any number of the 3 core pillars. And we've assigned 1 coach for every 2 college to have regular check-in calls and provide feedback as needed as we lead into the earlier part of 2015, when we hope the colleges, when we expect the colleges to be beginning to implement some of this work. So in addition to that, we've had, I believe, 8 or 9 webinars for the colleges to go deeper on particular issues relevant to the work, and we've had learning events beginning with DREAM last year, but we've also had workshops conducted at each, at least 2 of the 3 states have had their own workshops through their annual kind of higher education summits that focus on WFSNCC. So there are a variety of things. If you join the network, you'll be provided a number of supports to support your work moving forward. And lastly, we recently developed a monthly newsletter that provides some information about what's happening in the network and any updates or deadlines that are upcoming, additional resources that may have come in from our partners, research, reports from LIST or from United Way, just to kind of give a high-level snapshot of some of the things that are going on more broadly in WFSN. So again, I know I ran through that relatively quickly, but I'm conscious of time, and I want to pass it over to Christina Testabuzzi from Norwalk Community College. But I encourage you to take down any questions now from either sections that I discussed, and I'd be happy to address those questions toward the end. So I will pass it now on to Christina Testabuzzi from Norwalk Community College.
Thank you, Julian, and thank you, Alyssa. And I am very excited to be a part of this call today. I recently joined as a technical coach and am working, we'll begin some active engagement with 2 schools in the Virginia area, and I'm looking forward to that. What my role is today is to share with you sort of the frontline experience of implementing this model and doing this work with our students at our school. Just a little context, Norwalk Community College is about 45 minutes outside of New York City, located in Connecticut. We are excited to be an Achieving the Dream Leader College, and we are very engaged with our community, which is, as many of us in the community college sector are. I mean, we take the word community, as many of us do, very seriously. Our community in particular is unique in that it is sandwiched between significant wealth and extreme poverty. And so meeting the needs of our students is obviously something that we take great pride in, but we have such a large, potentially such a large spectrum of different needs of our students. This particular model actually helps address all of those student needs and really helps to enhance long-term economic security for our students by complementing our academic support services. So Norwalk has about 6,500 students. We, as many of our institutions, have a variety of career and technical programs. We also serve and feed into our Connecticut State University system. So Alyssa, if you can move on to the next slide. I already mentioned a little bit about our community that we're located in, having poverty and wealth on both sides of that. And we have a wonderful organization in our community called the Fund for Women and Girls of the Fairfield County's Community Foundation. And this foundation actually came to us as an institution saying, we've just done this research, and we were involved in the research. I was not at the institution at the time, but our provost and our president were very involved in conducting some of the research about seeing what the needs are in our community. And that actually started in about 2007. So in 2007, this report, which you can see on the screen, Holding Up Half the Sky, was put together and published and really talked about the status of women and girls, specifically in Fairfield County. What's very exciting about this model is that you can tailor, and you should tailor it to the needs of your community. And in our particular situation, we found the disparity between what single-family households were earning and what they needed to survive in this particular part of the country was significant. The disparity was huge. And the Fund for Women and Girls, through the research, identified some specific issues, and one of that was specifically a lack of college degree completion. So they approached the college and the foundation of our college, and our community college foundation. Melissa, you can move forward. So the Fairfield County Community Foundation, who wrote the report, and their board of directors came to us and to the NCC Foundation, and really an amazing collaboration was started. They reached out to the Annie E. Casey Foundation, in which they then talked to us about their Center for Working Families, as it was initially called. So forgive me if I refer to it as Center for Working Families. I'm changing my nomenclature by the Working Families Success Network. But as we originally started it, we were referred to as the Center for Working Families. And they brought that model to us. And as a board, the board of the foundation and the board of the Fairfield County Community Foundation then wrote out what they wanted to see, their outcomes, their educational outcomes, economic outcomes, that really touched upon all of the bundled services that this model allows you to incorporate. And they created some very specific outcomes and identified our program, which, as you'll see on the next slide, in the face of our program, at that time, the Family Economic Security Program. So we, at NCC, we chose to implement this model really with a research focus. And that was to see what would work to help increase the economic security, in particular, through high-touch services, single moms. So you will see that there are all women in this photo, and you will also see what I'm extremely proud of and very important to me is an incredibly diverse group of women. And what they were all doing that was in common was they were pursuing their degree. They wanted to pursue their degree to enhance a better life and a better opportunity for their families. And the way that we designed our Center for Working Families, or Working Families Success Network, and as I'll affectionately refer to as FES, Family Economic Security Program, the way that we had designed ours was to implement it through using high touch and low touch, as much of this model and initiative talks about. So on the next slide, you'll see how we actually delivered our services and how we did that. And then shortly after that, I'll talk about really how we encompassed and delivered those bundled services. So it was really important for the funders involved, and depending on how you implement this initiative and in what areas that it is housed in the college, more than likely you will have multiple stakeholders. So the stakeholders in our initiative were really the funders, the college, of course our students, and then our larger community. And so it was very important that they wanted to see, and we all wanted to work really at creating change at 3 different levels, which is a pretty big undertaking, to create and foster change at the individual level, the institutional level, and the community level. So just for kind of to give you a window of timing, again, this report was written in 2007, and it actually took a lot of time, a lot of nuancing, and a lot of conversations between all the stakeholders involved to actually begin the program in 2008. And that's actually when I joined the college. I joined specifically in a new role as director of this Family Economic Security Program. But what I also want to point out, in 2007, 2008, as many of you may know from your own student experience, experiences, the economic landscape started to shift. And so all of a sudden, they had presented this program to provide bundled services to enhance economic security for low-income students, and all of a sudden, who was low income and who was middle income was all starting to shift. Families who were hanging on by having 3 jobs now lost one of those 3, and now we're in a predicament of, do I continue school? Do I find another job? Can I find another job? So one thing that is important about the model is that it was fluid for us, and that working with our stakeholders, we were able to still deliver the bundled services, but to also address the changing needs on our campus. So our program started in earnest in the fall semester, the latter part of fall 2008. And we then continued the program in that capacity for 5 years, and we're in our second, actually renewal, so now we're in our 7th year, obviously, or excuse me, 6th year of the program. But what we did us to work with our general students, the general student body, any adult student and or student with family. But I do want to just, I think it's important that you realize our particular model, the cohort in particular, focused on single moms. And we had 106 students come through the program over the 5 years. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the changes that we did see at the individual level with that cohort, as well as institutional and community changes. And I know earlier there was a slide that indicated in 2010 we had 60 students engaged. So I wanted to mention that to you because that's how we chose to implement our model, with a very intentional research focus. So that's why our numbers were a lot smaller, and we were very fortunate to have a great amount of participation and response. So as you'll see on the next slide, and again, please, as we are going through this, as Jillian said, make sure you take the time to write down any questions, curiosities, concerns, anything about anything that we're saying. And I know at the end of the presentation, my contact information is available. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay. So one of the things that I want to mention about the bundled services, as you can see, they're at the center of this square, is that we felt those bundled services were very important. But our role as an academic institution was to encourage and foster their academic success. We firmly believe that with this work, we were creating long-term security for families, completing the degree that they've stopped and started or delayed. And in order to do that, it couldn't just be about academics. It couldn't just be about finances. It couldn't just be about career. But it also had to be about the personal. And what were the barriers in these 4 areas that existed that we had to try to address? Early on, I would say remove. Well, with these students, removing personal barriers is nearly impossible. But what you can do is, and what we have done through a lot of our education and income and work supports, is help students learn how to cope differently and learn how to handle the stressors that do come up in their very busy and complicated and wonderful lives, but how to address those barriers so that they can move forward to be academically successful and ultimately successful in the long term. So we delivered these bundled services with one full-time director. And again, I think the hands-on part of it is very important. We delivered it with one full-time director, that was myself, and 2 part-time coaches. So we were seeing the cohorts of students as well as doing general outreach to the larger student parent and adult student populations. So if we were doing a financial literacy workshop on IDAs, we would deliver it with our cohorts, get some feedback from them as to what they found helpful and useful, and then we would then repackage that and do a session for the larger community, and or go into our freshman orientation or other classes upon request. So we So we've worked very hard with our cohort students to then inform what we as a program, but more importantly, what we as an institution had to do differently. And I want to stress and point out something that Julian said before. He said that it's not about reinventing the wheel. Well, with any grant-funded program, if it is a drop in the hat, it is not going to produce the long-term change for your students and your campus that you want. And so one of the things that was very important with our particular program, which was actually housed in academic affairs, our biggest cheerleader for the program and our strongest proponent of putting this program in place was, at the time, our provost, Pamela Eddington. And she felt very firmly that it needed to stay in academics just because she had been very involved with it from the beginning, and there was a research component to it. But I actually came into this work, and I'm not sure what the background is of the folks on the call or for those that would be implementing the programs. My background was all in student affairs and student services. So when I came into this, the first lens that I applied was that of the student lens, and how are we going to best serve our students while at the same time addressing all the bundled services. Excuse me. So with that being said, it wasn't about reinventing the wheel. It was about finding out what currently existed on the campus. So what are the resources on your campus that already do some of these things? Are they functioning in isolation? Are they sort of serving only particular populations? How can this initiative work with and leverage other resources to help existing programs on campus? So we saw our program, the Family Economic Security Program, and the services that we provided really as a portal into the larger community. So we worked with our Workforce Development Office and our extended studies to help students who maybe the certificate was the right opportunity then, but we wanted to connect them to the degree as a sort of scaffolding. So we would work closely with them, but we weren't necessarily the ones delivering the workforce development. But we were sort of the portal, and what I'd like to say is the safe space for our students where they knew that their challenges and their experiences in their life would be clearly understood and respected, and then using our coaching model, moving them through that. So if we knew our students needed mental health counseling, then we knew that we needed to get them to counseling services on campus. So we would continue with the coaching and the empowerment, but for the counseling and for the issues that were really of such a nature that were crippling their ability to continue, we made sure that they connected with existing services. The same with career, education, employment. We did have and work with a career coach who was also part-time, but they worked with our career services so that the students knew that there were places that existed on campus in addition to what we did. So your bundled services may very well pull together existing services. We all know we're doing more with less on our community college campuses, and sometimes people dig in and don't want to let go. But what we discovered at our campus was that when we realized that it's our students who are benefiting and we all come to the same table, there's a significant benefit for our students and for our institution. All right. So now I want to move on. And again, please make sure if you have any questions that you weigh in. At this point, I want to talk about the individual influences. I have to say that this initiative and this work actually has been very influential just personally for me. Some of the students that we've met have been incredibly important, and seeing them succeed has been challenging at times, as much of our work is, and also exhilarating. So through the cohort of students that we have at this point, and we're still working with a small number of students who have not completed their associate's degree yet, but we actually have 51% of our students have gotten their associate's degree, and 20% have already completed a bachelor's degree. And that's what we mean by the long-term economic security. As an example, one young woman who started off as a clerk typist in our admissions office, who was a single mom of 3, now fast forward 7 years for her, she is now in a records office with her bachelor's from Fordham University working at Westchester Community College. So not only did this program inspire and motivate and empower her to continue, but it also encouraged her to give back and work in the same field. So that's something that is very exciting. And much of that work, obviously, as a result, was the result of working with our achievement coach. And our financial coach, you'll see here, we had some very particular data points that our funders wanted to see, one of which was increasing their credit score. And through the work of our financial coach, they were indeed able to do that pretty highly. And we had a lot of students who it took a long time for them to even talk about their credit score. Then we also, one of the other outcomes that they wanted to see was the students increasing their income to expense ratio. And what we saw in this was a change in financial habits. So the financial and asset building, people opening up a retirement account or knowing how to ask for one. You know, there's the bundled services, they come in handy when you're talking about, as an example, financial and asset building, and they're going into a job interview and they have to talk to someone about securing retirement and securing long-term insurance and such. And so those kind of things, if they're done in isolation, you know, workforce and career readiness and conversations happen in one office and conversations about asset building happening in another, the students will not get the benefit of that well-rounded experience to go into and have that conversation with future employees. The last two data points I think are very important, and it's interesting. Our funders were very intrigued by the fact that there was so much personal transformation from the students who were involved in the cohort. We saw a significant increase of students that pretty much increased their ability to cope differently and develop different coping skills. We also, when asking our students at the end of the 5 years, and all of our surveys to see how students were doing always averaged about a 75% return rate, which was pretty significant. They wanted us to know what they were experiencing. And they knew this was a research component and program as well right from the beginning. So the 97% reportage of people improving their sense of self-worth was extremely huge for us. These were folks who now were coming through a program, developing a sense of confidence that they didn't necessarily have prior to this program, or they had it, but it wasn't nurtured, and I think that's really important. One of the things that I do want to make sure I mention is one of the ways that we delivered our services to the cohorts and even the larger student population is actually through a retreat format. We had an all-day program in which there were workshops in all 4 of our areas, the academic, the personal, the career, and the financial. And we actually provided community building activities, child care most important. We provided breakfast and lunch for our students to come together. And these students came to these events every semester, year after year. At first, we were of the mindset that we would deliver these workshops, you know, once a month, you know, or 4 times a month, and our students don't have that time, your students don't have that time. So what we found was making it easy for them to come to campus for a full Saturday, and that means they gave up a lot. We know some of our students had classes, so there was an alternative assignment they could complete, but they had to come to this program. And the fact that they continued to come even after they graduated with their associate says a lot about this particular program. All right, so again, as far as individuals and changes that we've seen there, we're continuing to see that as the students are even reporting back to us now. I know we have the 20% was actually as of last May, and I know we have another handful of students who've recently graduated with their bachelor's. So next we're going to talk about the community, I believe. Sorry, Alyssa. I'm sorry, institutional influence is next, I believe. Sorry, there we go. I mentioned this was a research program and that the model and the initiative and the bundled services provided a lot of ability to work with our students in so many different levels. But the important goal was how was this going to transform the institution? Julian mentioned how is it going to change the culture of the institution? Well, after 5 years of this research, the institution has created an Office of Adult Learning, and that's actually now the office that I'm director of. We still have our achievement coach and we still have our financial coach who are still working with our remaining FEST students, but also now working on a larger scale with more adult students and students with children. One of the things that I feel very strongly that these bundled services did is they showed, in our particular case, adult students and students with children, that our campus cared about them and their family and their long-term economic security. And so we actually did something as simple as creating family-friendly events on campus. So they would come to an event with their child. We had a particular program called Trunk or Treat. If you're interested in it, message me. I can tell you more about it. But basically, it was a Halloween event where our adult students and students with children could bring their children and at the same time find out about resources and services on campus. So all of the bundled services were also engaged in this family-friendly activity on campus. What's very exciting is it's become a tradition, and it's also, which helps change culture, and it's also become a joint project between student government and the Office of Student Activities. So it's not just the Office of Adult Learning, and our student clubs and activities also participate. We've also done toy drives on campus that have also engaged our student parent families. We've implemented financial literacy programs. We saw what they did with the retreats that our students had, and we saw what the financial coaching did with our cohort students. So we made sure that we put ourselves on committees and programs and activities to change orientation and to implement new financial coaching programs in the first-year experience classes. One of the things that I think is really important is I mentioned that we were housed in academic affairs. But we couldn't, this work is student affairs work. So much of what this is student affairs work. It's addressing the student holistically. It's enhancing their student development wherever they are in that development. So one of the things that was very important is what we had seen with our students with some of their career service needs, their mental health counseling needs, and those in particular have now informed the college in that we have re-engaged and sort of reinvigorated our career services based on some of our feedback and our work with our students. And we now have a full-time mental health counselor. We started off with a part-time one because our data showed that we needed it. So what you do, and the data is so important, can show the institution what else needs to be done and what more needs to be done. And so as a result, we went from a part-time mental health counselor to a full-time mental health counselor. Also enrollment management. We hear so much about the changing demographics of higher education. Well, here we've had a successful program with students coming in, staying in, graduating, and moving on. And so what was it about that that worked? So we were a very active part of the enrollment management task force that was recently put together that is actually now implementing some of the things that we're talking about. Also, the creation recently of an on-campus food pantry. We found that food insecurity issues, as so many of us know, was a significant issue for our students, and so offering a food pantry on campus is something that we are kicking off in about 3 weeks. During November, during Thanksgiving time period, we had a food drive, which met with such an incredible amount of support from our faculty and staff and our students. And we noticed an uptick in donations when we said that all the donations are for our own on-campus food pantry. People wanted to give to help our own students. And this initiative and these bundled services are a way of showing those students how important they are to us. Another institutional change, as I mentioned, was one of our foundation, one of our partners, the NCC Foundation. And I know for any of you who might want to engage your foundation in this work, I know that our director of our foundation, Ms. Ann Rogers, would be happy to speak with you, so please let me know if that would be of help to you. But our NCC Foundation also started to change how they awarded scholarships. Our cohort students did receive some financial scholarships as a part of their participation in this program. And what we saw was that, as you know, with returning adult students coming back after, say, a 10-year gap when they bottomed out 10 years ago, and they're now trying to start over, their GPA stays there. It doesn't go away. And what it does is no matter how good they do now, that previous GPA, which was not so great, holds them back. And so now our foundation is actually seeing what investing in students who are improving does, and indeed now are allowing for scholarships for students who are improving upon their return. So from their first to their second semester when they return, they need to see a certain increase in their percentage of their GPA. Also, we found that we were able to provide summer financial support for our students, and that helped expedite their completion rate. We know that from larger research, but our very local research also supported that. And lastly, our foundation sort of broadened how they look at supporting student success. And they realized that, yes, scholarships, the very traditional thing that most foundations do, are very important, but they also realized that the importance of funding staff to provide the coaching for the students was critical. We've implemented 2 new programs, both of which are using coaches, modeled after the coaches, the Achievement Coach and the models in the Working Family Success Network. I know I'm moving fast. I am also trying to be respectful of time. I know that I believe I have one more slide, and that is the community level of change. I'm sure many of us, because we're involved in this work, know the importance and possibly know the research that speaks to when a mother pursues their higher education, that their children's chances of success, educational success, are enhanced significantly. I know the Aspen Institute and their Ascend program has been doing some wonderful work around this. And what we realized that there were I apologize, there is a typo in that slide. So I apologize, Alyssa, but it is over 190 children have seen their mothers pursue higher education. So I do apologize for that. So again, that's over 190 children have seen their mother pursue their college degree. And that is a significant factor when you look at what a mother's college education does to influence her family's life. We also did some research and realized that 92% of our students report that they shared the information from theft that they got with the coaches and the retreats and the programs with their family and friends. It was not uncommon for us to get a call from someone's sister saying, I hear that you all can talk to me about an IDA or a scholarship program or can help me with getting back into college for a certificate. It wasn't uncommon to get those phone calls. And in addition, we had a budget coaching partner, the Women's Business Development Council of Southwestern Connecticut, was also instrumental in providing our financial coaching with us. We contracted with them for the first 3 years of the grant, and then 2 years afterwards, at the college, we then assumed full responsibility for hiring and supporting the financial coach. That organization then took the coaching model and the financial and asset building component of these bundled services and are now doing budget coaching throughout Southwestern community with both college and non-college goers. So it really, what they saw happening at NCC influenced what they wanted to do at the larger level. I know that there's probably so much more that I can go on and on about. It is a model that I feel has changed our institution. I feel it has changed many students' lives. And one of the things that I think is important is that even though this program started off as a small, high-touch cohort program, the changes are now much larger. The changes are much more institutional and truly change what we do. The state of Connecticut just started a program, a financial incentive program to encourage students to come back to college. It was a no-brainer that our staff would work with those students. And so we're the only college in the system that applies a retention component to this financial incentive to go back to, the program's called Go Back to Get Ahead, but we're the only institution that is providing these wraparound support services, these bundled services to the students in that program so that the stopping and starting that they've done before comes to an end and they complete. So I'm very proud to be a part of this work and happy to help you in any way that I can, and I'm excited that more people want to really change their campus and how they serve students by using this model.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christina. That's so helpful to kind of hear real-time how this work has been implemented on your campus and evolved over time to catalyze culture change, to support student success, and just be a great addition to the work being done at your institution generally. I hope that kind of ATD providing kind of the nuts and bolts and some of the history and kind of theory behind the importance of providing holistic supports for students, particularly low-income students, on their pathway to and through college, combined with kind of the knowledge and expertise of Christina's work at Norwalk Community College, and some of the nuances of how it's been implemented and what impact, predicted and unpredicted perhaps, has happened as a result. So I do want to thank Christina again for those insights, and we're so happy to have her on our technical assistance team moving forward for engaging colleges in this manner and many others. So I do want to, would like to pause, and we're going to take a look to see if there are any questions. As Alyssa mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, various ways that you can indicate if you've got a question, and this can be for the entire webinar, not just particular pieces.
So there are two. I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that you can ask a question through the question pane. You are also able to raise your hand, and I can unmute your line. So I see that Linda Rose has raised her hand, so I'm going to unmute you. And hi, Linda. Are you there, and can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, because I think I'm at Los Angeles Southwest College, one of the 9 colleges in the LACCD district, and I guess all the things that I've heard, and I have facilities, but my concern is about the faculty and the staff on campus, and how do you get them engaged?
That is a wonderful question that I will kind of almost immediately punt to Christina, kind of understanding the internal politics, perhaps bureaucracies of getting faculty buy-in to play active roles in this work that some may think is not aligned with their job responsibilities. So Christina, I'm sure you've got some thoughts about that.
Absolutely. Actually, in at a related note, my prior life, I was director of health and wellness at a college in Manhattan, and I was told, but colleges aren't social service agencies.
Yes.
When I began this work, I was told, but we're not a social service agency. I'm like, okay, but let's talk about your student Susan. Why didn't Susan come to school today? Well, she couldn't afford to get to school. Okay, and let's talk about, and I'm being sort of facetious in my tone, but it's not easy. It is definitely important to get those early allies. I'm totally upfront and honest. When your Dean of Academic Affairs is your biggest ally and proponent, on one hand, it opens the door for the conversation. On the other hand, here's another thing being handed from the top down. And so what was really important early on was that we did have some faculty, and it would be the faculty in the academic areas that address these issues that started to be our key allies. We created an advisory board and involved them early on to help identify some of the outcomes and some of the data points so that they were able to say, this is what I want to know about. And it is important where you place the program. The other, you mentioned faculty, but then some folks in the student services side may be of the mindset, well, this is what I already do. Why are you coming in to do my work? Mm-hmm. So it's about the nuancing of the building of the allies, mm-hmm. and don't be afraid to go slowly at it. I know numbers are important. I know scale. Sorry, Julian, I know it's important. But it is also important that it's implemented in the right way. Okay. When I first started this work 5 years ago, I started to, when I was adjuncting, put a small paragraph on my syllabus about if you are struggling with food security, financial security, all the non-academic issues. I put a blurb on my syllabus that said, if you're struggling with these issues, let us know. It's not an excuse for you not to do your work, but it is something that will help us understand the context with which you're trying to be successful. And if you need help, go to X, Y, and Z. Now there's about 5 different departments that have that same paragraph on their syllabi. But it definitely took time, and it took those key allies. I hope that answers your question. Feel free to talk to me offline if that would be of help too.
Okay, thank you. It does. I think I'm opening the door because I had the Faculty Senate President agree to we're having a workshop in a couple of weeks, and it's about under-resourced learners. And as I'm listening, I'm thinking, oh my God, there's the open door. So
Right.
if I open the door there, and this is all this was faculty driven, the Senate wanted to do it, they wanted to educate other faculty on campus about under-resourced learners, what they were. And I'm thinking now, the door is open, so now it's, oh, I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's some great work that I know there's a couple research reports that were written, and I'm sure Julian can get a hold of them, even just to have them nearby in case anyone has any questions.
Oh, that would be great.
It is so very important when that door becomes open to jump through it, but not to knock people over as we go through it, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
That was a wonderful question. Thank you, and a very, very relevant one. And I think two really important takeaways there are, I think as Christina mentioned, the importance of kind of identifying the coalition of the willing internally who are interested in supporting students in this way, and then using that to kind of promote culture change and increase the number of aha moments that happen along the way. And to the extent that conversations, as you mentioned, Linda, are being had with the Faculty Senate, I think are also very critical. This kind of goes to the broader retention and completion model of becoming increasingly student-centric, and what does that mean? How do we redefine supporting students? So thank you again. One other question that we have has to do with DREAM, and if selected to join the National Consortia of WFSNCC colleges, what the expectations might be during upcoming DREAM in February in Baltimore, Maryland. I was going to close the webinar today with kind of immediate next steps about the initiative in terms of submitting a brief application, some of the parameters of the grant, the timeline, which I'll talk more specifically about in just a moment. But briefly regarding this question, if you're selected to join the national network, we would hope you're able to join Achieving the Dream Stream Conference in mid-February and attend a day-long workshop that we'll be hosting on Thursday, February 19th, during which you'll have a chance to meet all of the other colleges, many of the coaches, receive some in-person technical assistance, and get your work off to a strong start. So we can obviously talk more offline about the specifics of that day, but we would hope that if selected, you would be able to join us on February 19th for a day-long workshop in Baltimore during the DREAM conference. We don't currently have any other questions that have popped up on our end, but we certainly hope that you will reach out to me or Elissa directly. Our contact information is I believe, at the end of the webinar, and we would welcome a conversation to talk with you more about this work if you're interested in joining, and some of our own experiences to date in collaborating with the colleges that are in the network. So just briefly, I'm going to talk about next steps. Again, as I mentioned, Chancellor Rodriguez, Dr. Rodriguez, has been instrumental in a very short period of time in getting this on the radar of many of the LA community colleges. And he, as he may have already shared, we at this time are able to bring three LA colleges into the national network at this time. And the grant details specifically would be that colleges would receive a grant for $200,000 between now and June, July 2017. The initial grant amount would more than likely be about $25,000 to support planning. The second grant disbursement would be $100,000 to promote, to support implementation in the first year, and the final grant disbursement would be $75,000 in the final year. And so to that end, we ask colleges that are interested to submit to Achieving the Dream a mini RFP or a mini application that we will send to you immediately following this webinar. To the extent that Dr. Rodriguez hasn't already shared it with you, we'll send it to you again, and ask that you submit it back to ATD to the WFSN email address that you see there at the bottom by close of business 2 weeks from today on the 21st. A bit about the process moving forward from that point is that ATD will review the submitted applications and determine from the group, I believe there are 6 of the 9 who are very interested in this work, will determine 4 to 5 of those colleges, from if all 6 decide to submit, which 4 to 5 colleges will select to participate in a site visit / kind of interview on January 29th and 30th. We hope to let you know which colleges we select for that in-person meeting by the very latest, I would say, close of business on January 27th. But we kind of have to go through our own process with our various partners to make that determination. But I would ask you now to please hold everyone who's interested in who submits application to hold January 29th and 30th for a possible meeting in Los Angeles. I believe that the Chancellor's office will confirm that, so that in the event you're selected, you already have time blocked on those days for a meeting with Achievement and Dream staff, likely some of the funders of this initiative and some other partners to engage with you to talk more substantively about the work moving forward. And then we will make a further determination from the 4 to 5 colleges we meet with in person, which 3 will be selected to receive funding and join the national network. So that's just kind of briefly a bit of the functional components of the work moving forward. I certainly encourage you, and I really mean it, to contact Elissa or myself directly, and we'd be happy to talk with you more about this work as you fill out the application, should you decide to do so, or just to receive some technical assistance as you're filling out the application. I think we'll try to figure out the best way to where we should send the application. I believe we've got a number of college contact information for a number of college presidents, but each one of our existing colleges, we've got key contacts there that we correspond with mostly. So we'll kind of pin down the correct person, perhaps the folks who are on the webinar today, to receive the application and be our point of contact moving forward. So I'll pause now if there are any questions that have popped up just in terms of our own process, the grant timelines, and once and if you're selected, we'll obviously discuss more so what the immediate next steps are with regard to technical assistance and the expectations of the grant. Some other questions have popped up, so please expect to hear, maybe?
We will plan to send along a copy of the PowerPoint as well as a recording of the webinar that'll be on our YouTube channel, and all of the information that Julian just went over.
And additionally, we have on Achieving the Dreams website, I mentioned the number of other webinars that we've conducted for the WFSNCC consortia on our website, and we'll include a link to those webinars that are all recorded for you all to kind of learn more about what this initiative is all about, in particular areas that we've gone deeper in those webinars. So we are very excited about expanding into Los Angeles. We're very excited. I believe it's very fertile ground for some of the reasons I mentioned before with regard to the number of students, students of color, the number of students who are low income and could use these types of support, this type of strategy to supplement their college pathway supports and services. Not least because we've got such a great network of Achieving the Dream colleges in the LA Community College District. It just makes it a natural fit for us to move forward in this way. So again, I really appreciate all of your time today and your questions. And please, and I mean it, do not hesitate to engage with us offline with any other questions regarding this initiative and prospective next steps. So Christina, thank you very much again for participating. It was hugely valuable to have your insights to complement Achieving the Dreams description of this work. And Elissa and others, we really appreciate your help, and I think that'll be about it. Please look forward to hearing from us very soon. Thank you.